Okay, we're going to get started here. I'm Mike Allen. I get to introduce the panel tonight, and then I'll be walking around with the microphone later on because we invite you all, if you got stories or a memory or a particular connection to our topic tonight, we invite you to take part in this. I'm going to introduce the fellow who's going to coordinate our session, and he's a guy I grew up with here in town, 4 years older than me, and kind of a role model for me growing up. And for better, for worse, yeah. But we were reminiscing tonight about 25 years ago, or 26 years ago, I guess, that we were at the Elks. We were at the Elks building. It was a Lucky Pierre reunion, actually, and we got to talking because the 75th anniversary of the rodeo was coming up, and we got to talking about an idea of having an Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame. And Rick Cole was there that night too, and that's kind, that was kind of the genesis of the Hall of Fame. Joel Smith is past president of the Ellensburg Rodeo. He served on the Ellensburg Rodeo board from 1982 to 2007. He has served on the Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame board as a founding member and past president of the Hall of Fame for 7 years. Served on our board from 1996 until the present. And he's going to be orchestrating a panel that will focus on the rodeo board, the duties of the rodeo board, and its many activities, and the role of volunteers in the Ellensburg Rodeo. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel now.
Thank you, Mike. Well, welcome to the 6th edition of the speaker series. This was a brainstorm of Daniel Beards, and it has been a very big success. We've had more people in this museum that hadn't been here before, and I look around today and I see a lot of familiar faces from people that have been here before. I see some past directors from the rodeo, Glenn Madsen and Scott. Good to see you, Scott Shelton, Roger Weaver, and my good friend, the wife of John Foster. Thank you for being here. Barbara. My memory's not so good. Anyway, it's great to see some of the current directors of the rodeo here tonight, too. So we're going to kind of go through a deal where we're talking about the evolution of the rodeo, both on a physical basis, which is the facility and how it changed, and also how the event changed over the years, and actually starting in 1969 when Ken MacRae was elected to the Ellensburg Rodeo Board and served until the year 2000. He was the arena director for many years, and he's going to be one of our panelists. Applause, come on. This is Ken MacRae. Also on the panel will be Scott Repp, and Scott started in, I think it was 86 to 2004. And this is a guy, one of the most creative guys I've ever spent any time with, and he has a history of putting together some of the greatest things in the changes, both in the facility and in the event. And so Scott's going to be on the panel as well. And thank you. And the current president of the Ellensburg Rodeo, Brian Twardoski. It's great to have him here. So he will be the third member of the panel. So come on up, you guys. We've only got 2 mics because I got to roll around with this mic a little bit. And we're going to start off talking a little bit about things that happen to how the rodeo board works, how it functions, how the committee structure works. And Ken, you were on this board in 1969. Kind of tell us about how many people were on the board and what kind of committees and that sort of thing. Will you please?
We had, and when I first got on the board, there were 15 board members. It's since been expanded two more to 17. But each one had an area that they had complete control over. One person was in charge of the grounds, and he has all the physical facilities and getting the ground prepared for the rodeo and so forth. Parking, I can't name all of them. One was the Royal Court. That was always a position that everybody really wanted. That's basically each person was their own boss. I was the arena director for many years, but I had some input in who got hired for the livestock and the contract acts. Buck Miner, my old friend, was actually in charge of what we called contracts, but I helped him a lot and probably had veto power, I guess. Anyway, it was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it very, very much. It got to be the biggest thing in my life outside of my veterinary practice, my family. So I was sort of came here with a little rodeo background. I started competing when I was in high school and went to my last rodeo at Pendleton, Oregon at the age of 75. So that was long enough.
Scott, tell me some of the committees that you've served on, and I know that there's a few things that you kind of invented over the years.
Okay, thank you. First off, I'd like to make a couple of quick comments. So Joel and Ken, who I had the pleasure of serving all the time I was on that Ellensburg Rodeo board, if you see a buckle on Joel, it's John Justin Committeeman of the Year. It's an award that only one committeeman out of 600 rodeos gets each year. It's presented in Las Vegas. It's kind of a Super Bowl ring, and both Ken and Joel have that, and I don't think they've been. Yeah. So anyway,
and then Scott, just to extend that point, also from our community, Steve Alder won that award about 10 years ago. So Ellensburg Rodeo Committee has 3 of those awards. To my knowledge, there's not another rodeo in the nation that has been able to exceed that.
Yeah, thank you. My history on this thing, I was just telling Ken sitting over here, I've got a record that can't be broke at the Ellensburg Rodeo, no matter what. The first year I was on the Ellensburg Rodeo board, I'd never been to the Ellensburg Rodeo and I'd never seen the Ellensburg Rodeo. So, and the other thing, the first year I was ahead of the Kiddies Parade the week before the Ellensburg Rodeo. I remember that very well, you know. And we had stick horses on parade downtown Ellensburg for some of you old ones. It was kind of a hit, you know. All the little kids brought stick horses and they rode up and down the street. So anyway, that's. But back to the committees, I guess. Ken mentioned that each of us had and I was really fortunate, as a lot of people were, to have this gentleman beside me sitting, you know, in the. I had, you know, Buck Miner and Lowell Driver, and I mean these guys were true cowboys. Most of us, a lot of the guys on the board are great guys. Fun to be around, and good businessmen. There's several of them here. Roger and Glenn Mattson is a university professor. We had a lot of good connections, but these guys truly were cowboys, and Ken made the Ellensburg Rodeo great for years. I mean, we had the best stock. The cowboys respected this man like nobody. I mean, if you ever were around the chutes, you know, you'd see these guys and they're getting in there and they're having their moment in glory, and he'd look at him, and they knew who he was, and he said, "Get on and get out." I remember being down there a couple of times, and he says, "Get on and get out." And you know, he's 6'4" like Brian. I'm the short guy. I'm standing up, not as tall as these guys, but anyway, they had a lot of respect. The fellows that I was fortunate enough to serve on the board were very well respected in this community, and I think it spoke well of the rodeo board over the years. I mean, they own businesses in town, and they everything they did was successful. So they brought a bunch of, a few of them have passed on, but my gosh, they were really good business people. We balanced a budget every year. Your wives and husbands would be happy at home to be that way. But anyway, I guess the things that I was involved with is I took over the behind the chutes one year, and we used to just have a little block building back there, and we got Budweiser to make a beer garden, and we went from making so much money to the point we had college kids on extra tuition. We were giving them extra money for tuition, I think, with all the money we were making selling beer, and then we all got to bounce around, I went from that to I was the head of concessions. I was kind of proud of that. I brought a T-shirt here, and Ellensburg. I used to be in the old cars and hot rod shows and stuff like that. I thought everybody had T-shirts and hats. I got on the board, and the first thing we had was a baseball cap that said Winston on it, which you don't do today, but that's what we had. So I talked to the rest of these guys, and I said, could I have a little budget and we do some T-shirts? So I had a friend, Mike Durant, who's a commercial artist in Seattle, and Mike created a bunch of T-shirts. And I think we had, a budget of $10,000, and I had them in cardboard boxes, and we were in those vomitories on the south side of the grandstands. And the fair didn't like us being over there because we were kind of competing in the fair in those days. But it was fun, and I see some people there. I know Patton Hall's here. We'd go down in the mornings. We didn't have a booth. We had cardboard tables and cardboard boxes. That's all we had. But it was really fun. I mean, the people came and they bought the stuff and thought it was pretty cool. One year, and there's a bottle here. All this stuff is coming to the Hall of Fame, but this is a collector's item. In 1989, I was the landlord of the depot, and there was a winery down there. And so I talked the guy, Jürgen Grieb, a German guy, had a winery. For some of you, don't drink that, you'll die for sure. But it's the label's cool. In 1989. They had a deal. It was called defamation of the flag, and you couldn't do disrespectful things to the American flag. But that was 1989. It was still okay. So Mike painted that picture, which we have an oil painting of a Sioux Indian with the American flag draped around him. Talked the board in again. I was kind of the black sheep. I said, hey, could we have some money to buy that? So we bought 100 cases of wine that cost $3 a bottle. Good wine, right? This was a landlord deal. Anyway, and then got it, and this is when the rodeo was on Friday afternoon. And so I was pretty proud of getting it. Well, Jürgen, we had those little paper labels. That morning, we're literally gluing the labels onto the wine bottles. And I'd gone up here to Kelleher's and got myself a nice new Ford truck. Thought it was pretty cool. So we put all that wine in the back, and the rodeo started like at 1 or something. About 11 o'clock, I come rolling into the rodeo grounds with this wine, and I couldn't sell it for $6 a bottle, so we sold it for 15. So they thought they were getting better wine. Anyway, did that. Well, guess what? When the thing was over, we sold all the wine before the rodeos. 100 cases, gone like that. But the side of my pickup, have you ever seen 50 cowboys grabbing wine cases off of the back of a pickup with a belt buckle on the side? I get home, my brand new truck's all scratched up. So that's anyway, I guess so. I went from that to we started the Ellensburg Rodeo Gold Buckle Club, and that first year, again, I had to talk the board into that deal. The first year we had 4 members. I'm kind of proud of those 4. Jim Webster, who's a friend in Seattle, Bill Knutson, who actually, it said in the book, Bob, and I think I told that wrong. But anyway, Bill Knutson was the public relations guy for the Seattle Mariners. John Ludka and my friend George Bender. That was the original 4 members. They paid $1,000 to get in. Okay. And in that, they got a Ellensburg Rodeo buckle and a nice little pin. They got seating and parking and some, and we had it in the old grandstands then. Had that little, it's okay, that little area thank you, that's up above. The next year, I'm doing this from memory, and I'm probably off, but we shared that area. Roger had a bunch of really good sponsors, Weaver, and so we were kind of outgrowing the space within a few years. So the next year we went to 18 members, to 58 members, to 112. We capped it at 150. And then we actually let a few sponsors in, Roger, if you remember who they had, because they were helping us out a bunch. So we had 150 members that were giving us, and what they got was meals, and and the idea was that they would bring friends and relatives and family to the rodeo and increase our ticket sales. And it worked, because a lot of these people own businesses on the west side, and they came over. And we had trail rides, golf tournaments, car shows. Every year we would do something for those little bolos that's on the, you've seen these little bumper stickers that say Ellensburg Rodeo. Every year we'd give them something, T-shirts and ball caps, and it got to be kind of a prestigious thing, and it worked out good. And now I think they maybe charge $1,500 for that. That led into my last thing. I'll get off the microphone here. Was the Western Village, and I had a good friend who got in the Gold Buckle. He's actually a professional football player for 9 years. Scott Eaton was from Seattle, and I brought him to the Ellensburg Rodeo, and I was telling him how great it was. And the old days, we used to everybody came in from that back side, and God, everything was OD gray, the back of the bleachers. There was no concessions. There was no entryway. So I thought, man, we need to have an old Western Village. So I brought it to the board, and that's another deal on the board. When you have an idea or you're voted down, you're supposed to shut up and be gone, Anyway, I was so disappointed because the guys didn't want to do it. So I went home, had an art minor at Central Washington University. Dr. Matson doesn't know that. But anyway, so I made a little paper doll deal of like an old Western Village. And I brought it back to the next board meeting, and I flipped it all up. So there was this little street with these old saloons. And anyway, they kind of thought that was okay. And now we're back to volunteers. We had the top hands, we had the posse, we had the rodeo board. Once a week, we would go all over the valley and rummage through old barns, and that's where all that wood came. And Kelly Shademan, who's currently on the board, excellent general contractor, Kelly oversaw the project. It's framed like a normal house underneath, and then it was really fun. We got up there, and guys had nail guns that never had a nail gun in their hand before. But you didn't have to be a good carpenter, because the worse it looked, the better it looked, right? It just. So anyway, that was, I think that was about the end of my. I would like to say, that I think a couple of people that maybe get overlooked once in a while is, in my tenure, Mary Williamson and Julie Ridgway. We had fabulous office help. I mean, when I created that Gold Buckle Club, it was a nightmare for her. I mean, you had 150 people that wanted tickets, and they wanted banquet tickets and Stuart Anderson tickets, and they wanted, it was a nightmare for those girls. I got patted on the back. Those girls did all the work. I mean, and when you sold people tickets and the ticket was behind a post, who dealt with it was those girls. They never came to me. So anyway, kudos and thank you to those girls. I don't see either one of them here, but if you ever see them, they did a great job. But anyway, that was, I guess, my tenure on there, Joel.
Brian, thank you, Scott. Do you have any input on how the board functions, how it works with the top hands, that sort of thing, committee structures and that sort of thing?
Yeah, certainly, Joel. Thank you. And it's interesting to hear the historical perspective of their roles and responsibilities on the board. It's always amazing to me. We have grown on the shoulders of the generations in front of us. We're proud of the heritage and the history of the Ellensburg Rodeo, and specifically proud of the board members that have been a part of building this great rodeo. It's a balancing act, right? In one hand, we've grown such that we are a big business. We are a large business. We're over $2.7 million business a year. That's a big business by any measure. Yet we're not a business. We're the blood, sweat, and tears of this community. We're passion. We're about this community. We are volunteers, right? So balancing that is a tremendous challenge. Yes, we have 17 members. We've grown a little bit from the original 15. We've got a lot of responsibilities, but at the same time, the Ellensburg Rodeo Board in no way, shape, or form gets the job done. We set the plan. We establish the vision. But we have to recruit additional volunteers. That's where our allied organizations are so crucial, right? We can't get anything done without the top hands, without the posse, without the Hall of Fame. and other stakeholders that come out of the woodworks to help us put on the Ellensburg Rodeo. It is a volunteerism, it's spirit, it is community involvement, and everybody pitching in and contributing towards what's really the shining star of the Kittitas Valley and Ellensburg. So yes, it's a blend of big business and pure volunteerism and community spirit. You know, we blend from folks that, you know, are responsible, like Julie Verdon and Alexa here from the Royal Court, to the Gold Buckle Club and Paul Woodward, that's responsible for the Gold Buckle this year, to marketing and getting the message and the brand out and having a brand playbook and making sure our images and colors and logos are just right and font type is just right. You know, those are probably not things you think about in 1958, but those are things that matter to a website or a social media post today. So those are things that we have board members and volunteers and in some ways paid partners that help us build that part of our business as far as brand and marketing and awareness. To, again, continual community outreach. You know, some folks in the community don't realize that the Saturday parade is actually a function of the Ellensburg Rodeo. Yes, it's a great participation and expression of our pride of our community. We're happy to do it for the community. But it's the Ellensburg Rodeo, and more specifically, the Ellensburg Rodeo top hands that organize and plan for and execute that parade. And it goes on, whether it's outreach with the Yakima Indian Nation that goes all the way back to the very beginning in 1923 and maintaining that partnership and making sure that it's healthy and that they're integrated into what we do, all the way through to the office staff that Scott ended his remarks with. Today, Megan Woodworth, now Meeks, leads our office staff, and there's a tremendous amount of work that goes through there. But all 17 board members have a massive responsibility to not only set the plan and the budget and be responsible for not only executing this year's plan well, but doing it in a fashion that we can build on what we have and continue to make it better for the next generation, right? I personally am exceedingly proud to be president and representative of this core group for the 100th Rodeo, right? That is a phenomenal privilege. At the same time, it has nothing to do with me. I fully respect, and all 17 of our current board members fully respect, that we are just carrying on the tradition that's been laid in front of us. And I almost think about every year as really like a puzzle, right? You put together a 1,000-piece puzzle. We know where some of the big pieces go because we've been taught, we've been shown the way. But every year is a little unique in problem solving and trying to keep it modern and keep it fresh. And so we're always tweaking the plan and trying to get creative and figure out how to make it better. Last year was an example. Hopefully most of you had a chance to visit Behind the Chutes, right? We've had a Behind the Chutes program for several decades. Last year we finally figured out how to turn the light bulbs on and get all our ducks in a row to make that thing a whole lot bigger and better. And, you know, back to the business side of it. We could not put on the Ellensburg Rodeo the way we do it today and the amount of money we put up today without making that Behind the Chutes program that Andy Andrews is running for us firing on all cylinders. We need every one of those $300,000 that Andy's going to earn this year to pay the bill to those cowboys, because we are paying out this year with all of the functions that are going on in the rodeo and Extreme Bulls and our partnership with the Best of the Best roping that Scott started and other folks. We're going to pay out to cowboys over $700,000 this year. And that is something that this community can be extremely proud of. Yes, we're a big business and it takes a lot of business planning to make all that happen. But at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with the spirit of this community and the volunteerism.
Thank you very much. That's great. Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to remark when he mentioned 2.7 million, that kind of took me back a little. When I was first on the board, our total budget was $50,000. And you can imagine how I had to argue for that to get enough money to put up for the livestock and the cowboys. When I ended up in close to 30 years later, the budget, the rodeo was on about a $500,000 budget, but in 23 years since then, it's more than tripled again. So those things. Another thing about the volunteers, I dug through my rodeo drawer in my filing cabinet, and I hadn't looked at it for a long time, but I picked up a list of my personal volunteers that I used to run the arena, and there's a page full of them. So I had about 75 people that I had to be in contact with and make sure they were going to do their jobs. Most of them, you couldn't have fired them if you'd have wanted to. They all enjoyed what they were doing. They came back every year, looked forward to it all year long, and was happy to be the part of it. In those days, the Saturday after the rodeo, the rodeo board put on a big thank you banquet for all the volunteers. I'm not sure what happened to that, but has that been?
Yes, we still do what we call the President's Party on Monday after the rodeo in the Go Buckle Room. All of our volunteers are welcome to join that party, so yes.
Well, the volunteers put the rodeo on, there's no doubt about that.
What's cool is I'm actually looking at your list, and there's a handful that are still a part of what we do today.
And there's another handful that have passed away.
Well, thank you, guys. This is any questions about how the board functions? It's pretty nice to have a representative from the 60s right up to the 2023. I'm going to move this a little bit into changes, things that happened on the facility side of things. You know, there's been some big changes over the years, and you know, if you have a chance to look at this video going on, it's kind of reminiscent of what was going on in the 50s. But maybe you guys could start talking a little bit about things that you were part of. I know Ken, when the timed event shoots came out of the northwest corner, you were part of the group that moved them over kind of where they're at now, right?
Yes, that's correct. For some reason, I've never known for sure, but in the old days, those chutes came right out of the corner. And in those days, there was no West End grandstand, and the track was all the way around there. But for some reason, when they built the West End grandstand, they still wanted to put the used tradition and come out of that corner, and it wasn't a very good arrangement. One of our famous cowboys, bulldogger Harry Charters, his steer veered a little bit to the left, his horse veered a little bit to the left, his knee hit the post and broke his leg, put him out for the rest of the season. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to take freshman mechanical drawing. I was not a draftsman, but I got volunteered and elected to make the plans for the new timed event end, and also when we built the new grandstand, the pins that were behind the bucking chutes. The old wooden pins that were back there behind the bucking chutes were pretty primitive. They only had about 3 pins. They had a great big long 30-foot long gate that they'd swing around, and whichever position that was in, well, then that's where the animals were. But I don't know how they ever got along doing that, but they did for years. But the pins, the timed event pins, I figured out how to make them out of stock Powder River equipment. So I measured it out so that all the gates and stuff worked for that. And we put that whole thing in one summer with rodeo board volunteers, no paid personnel except the welder. And so I was pretty proud of having that get done.
One of the things that took place at that point too was the new Buckaroos, and I had the privilege of standing in the old Buckaroo section a few times over the years, and those old pins you were talking about, when those bulls would get excited underneath there, the whole building shook. And I just think that big change and putting in that new Buckaroo section was a huge move for the Ellensburg Rodeo. It was very expensive. We had some partners in it. I think the city, the county, and maybe the Rotary Club probably. But anyway, that's what made that thing work. And had we not done that, those pens would probably still be there today.
One of the big changes that happened while I was on the board and early on was, to start with, we had no sponsorship money at all. But I think it was 82 or 83, I happened to be the president that year, but they wanted to televise the rodeo. And in order to do that, we had to come up with $40,000 input. And through some connections that we had, Stuart Anderson's Black Angus Ranch donated the whole $40,000 for that to happen. And one of the people that's in this room tonight was very influential in getting those sponsors in hand was Roger Weaver. He was sort of a guy that knew how to talk to him. And
I'll pick up right there, Ken, to show how things have, the momentum that you guys have built and the brand and the attractiveness of the Ellensburg Rodeo to the national TV audience. Instead of having to pay $40,000 this year to be on TV, they're paying us $50,000 for the right to be on TV. So, good job. Way to get that started.
One of the other things that took place, when Scott and Ken and I and Roger were on the board and Glenn was, the track was removed. And people still ask me today, how come the track was removed? Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit? No, you don't, do you?
I heard it was Scott's fault, but I'm not sure.
Well, I tell you, once the Gold Buckle building was built and the seating all the way around the north and west and east end, the only time you saw anything of the track event was right in front of the old grandstand. And it was a big surprise who was coming around first place because nobody could see it. And that was one of the reasons. And then there were some accidents, that took place that influenced the board that we were on to get rid of the track.
Used to have a hill race, which was pretty fun. And I'll give you a couple quick stories here, but my father was in the thoroughbred racehorse business, and so it was kind of a big deal to win the hill race. So he brought a horse right off the track. Longacres was still going in Seattle, and I have a cousin, my wife's name is Joe, but I had a cousin, Joe, that could ride pretty good. So Joe got on the horse. We practiced a couple times, and anyway, the day of the race, which is Saturday, we had a box, and my mom and dad and sister and all her family was there. And anyway, this horse, it was a double letter. It could really run. It had a track record in Spokane. So anyway, horse takes off, and all the posses have their color shirts on. Ellensburg was way ahead. That was my cousin Joe. And anyway, we get there, and he don't come back, and he's dead last. And everybody's there, and I walked up to him, and I said, Joe, what happened? He says, we called the horse Katrina because it was Katrina's letter. He says, Katrina could run, but she didn't know how to turn. There was a spot up on the top. You had to turn around, come back down. Anyway. The other, I think, fun story, and it involves the gentleman beside me, is when we were remodeling, the old grandstands, we used to have this sound system. Gogi Grant was our music guy that turned into Chuck Lopeman, who's now that Austin Lopeman. But anyway, if you were there, the announcer would say something, and it would take about 2.5 seconds for it to get over to the south, and you get an echo, and people would complain, but it was electric cords that went all the way around with speakers, and it wasn't the technology they had today. So they put this new bank of speakers right out in the middle, and we had the big telephone poles and the guy wires. And anyway, Ken was the arena director at the time, and the first year we had it, now he's going into your Hall of Fame, Dan Mortensen, who was our world champion. He comes into the board meeting, and during we always had that board meeting Wednesday before the Ellensburg Rodeo on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. and he's heated up. And he says, man, he says, you know, there's a big shadow out there. And he says the stock runs out there and they dodge the shadow and like that. And gosh, here's all us green guys. We're sitting there looking at each other because Dan Mortensen, world champion, he's giving us hell, right? And Dr. MacRae's sitting over here, and he says, you know, Dan, he says, I've been on this board it's close to 30 years now, and I've never seen anybody win any money at the middle of the arena. And Dan turned around and left. So anyway, he is going into your Hall of Fame, but I remember it was a great call. They were all going, yeah, nobody wins out there, you know. So.
Well, we all have kind of Dan Mortensen stories, but we're really great that the guy that has won all those world championships and won 4 buckles in Ellensburg is going to be inducted this year. One of my stories that Dan Mortensen used to get upset about was parking. All of a sudden, we were told that the Hilltop was available for sale. And I think there were 15 on the board at that time, and nobody really thought that was a real necessity at the time, but realized that we're running out of parking. And this is before the Gold Buckle Club. And anyway, Dan Mortensen's won the event, and he's walking across, and my job that day was to walk him over to the track to get his buckle and other gifts. And he was just in my ear about the parking up there. And I can't remember if it was Flint Rasmussen or Butch Lemkuehler, but they're out there in the arena too, and they said, just lay off that guy. He has nothing to do with parking. But anyway, the evolution of the whole thing is we ended up with that hilltop parking, which became contestant parking with a building up there for storage. And parking has always been an issue, hasn't it, guys?
Well, and back to the board responsibilities, Dave Standish and Steve Alder for a long time. Dave was a state patrolman here in town and had some authority that way. It helped with the police department and the sheriff's department. And, got it organized. You need to be organized, and Dave did a wonderful job of, keeping things organized. And, again, all the board members, Ken Peterson had grounds and Dave was parking and Steve Alder was security, and, Gene Dane, we had the fire chief, we had the county sheriff, everybody there, we had it pretty well handled. Another quick fun story, we were out at Stuart Anderson's at that Sunday night party years ago, and remember the old liquor laws? You had to quit drinking at midnight, I think, or 10 o'clock or something, and used to kind of stay out there as long as you could. Anyway, we go into the T&E Tavern in Thorpe, which was that little watering hole in Thorpe, and that was kind of tradition. So everybody said, "What time is it?" Well, you'd get there before if you quit serving at 12 o'clock. We'd try to get there at 11:45, and the guy that ran it, he just let us stay there. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the guys are going, "Man, we're going to get thrown in jail." And I says, "You know what? I don't think it's going to happen. We got the prosecuting attorney in here. We got the sheriff's head up here, and I says, and we got the head of the state patrol. All 3 of them are here." And I says, "I don't think they." And their wives are dancing on the tables. So that's anyway, those were fun times. And I think Ken alluded to it. I think part of the fun, and all the directors that are here, it was a lot of fun. You got to see dreams happen, but you had, there were times, the old deal, we'd have a board meeting at the fairgrounds, and then we'd hash out everything we thought we needed to hash out, and then we'd go to the palace, and that's where the business would really happen, because everybody could swear and tell people really what they thought, The Daily Record used to come, John Letka would come and kind of took notes at the board meetings, so you had to be a little careful, but...
Brian, maybe you could highlight a little bit, since we're talking about facility changes and whatnot, give us a little idea of what you're looking at for the 100th here this year.
Yeah, there's a couple of things we're trying to do to continue to improve the facilities. That's a constant focus for our rodeo board. One, we want to improve the payout and continue to attract the very top cowboys and be, really one of the best and the biggest rodeos on the trail. But next to that is also to continue to evolve and grow our facilities. And so every year we try to do something. This year we're actually taking a couple of steps forward, we believe, in a couple of ways. One, the sponsorship program that Roger Reaver has been a big part of, and others in the past have grown. And that program is is outgrown the Western Village. We are proud to say that we've got so many brands and so many companies and so many people that come to us through the sponsorship program that we're out of room, as we are with a lot of things. So we're trying to expand the VIP room there in the Western Village to the west. So that is one project that we're undertaking. Not 100% sure we're going to get it all done this year, but we are going to create more elbow room there because the sponsorship program absolutely demands it, and frankly, the dollars are there to make it happen. From a livestock standpoint, livestock housing standpoint, on the very east end, underneath the hill, we have had cow-calf pairs there for wild cow milking and some extra bulls over there, and horses and whatnot. Most of you have probably known that the wood that I think were up there was back when probably Scott Shelton was born or something, and it's starting to fall off. And I took some bubble gum a couple of years ago and stuck it back up to get a couple of those boards to stay, but long story short, we've demoed all that. If you've been over there in the last month or so, all that's gone, and there's brand new Noble panels over there. So that very east end underneath the hilltop has been renewed, and they're finishing off that. We're also continuing to improve tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Go Buckle building is going to get sprayed down and get a new coat, and so she's going to be shiny and pretty as well. And then I would say the most obvious thing that you're going to see Labor Day weekend when you walk into the arena is brand new, shiny bucking chutes. We are really proud of that. We've been working on this for a number of years. I think the last time the bucking chutes were renewed was 25 years ago, give or take.
Probably longer because it was
1999, so that's 24 years ago. So I was off by 1 year. I apologize. But at any rate, we've been working on it for a while, and Scott's probably going to be happy to hear that WW is going back in there. So we're putting brand new WW bucking chutes. They're arriving in town this next week, and we will be installing them here between now and Labor Day. So we're super excited to have modern, state-of-the-art bucking chutes that are really kind of from a TV standpoint, other than our iconic red wall of Ellensburg Rodeo every Labor Day weekend. Those bucking chutes get a lot of attention on TV, so we're proud to renew that. There's other things we're doing in the future, but for this year, that's what our primary focus is for the facilities.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful. It's obviously 100th year anniversary. It's an old facility that just keeps having to be renewed and rebuilt. I just want to add the Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame last year went to the expense of adding the arena record sign that's hanging right above right on the buckaroo seats as you come in, and we're very proud to have put that together for the rodeo and for the facility. I'd like to move into a little bit of things. We've talked about changes in the facility. Let's talk about little changes in the event. There's been a lot of them. I mean, we've added steer tripping. We've added ladies breakaway roping, and there's just so many different things that have taken place. And Ken, you've been going to this rodeo for a lot longer than most of us. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes you've seen.
Well, adding those events over the years was sort of an argument between myself and the board in the early days. I roped myself, and team roping was not a standard event in those days, but it was held mostly in California and Arizona at those rodeos. But I wanted to add team roping, and it took a long time for the board to finally agree to do it. And one little quick story was, John Ludke always went to our board meetings. He was editor of the Ellensburg Daily Record and was a rabid rodeo fan, and he always wrote a story up the next day after the rodeo meetings about what we talked about and so on. Anyway, the night that we agreed to have the team roping next year, John took me aside. He said, "Where are you going to get your barbers?" I said, "Barbers? What are you talking about?" He said, "You're going to have some barbers in the grandstand cutting hair so the people will have something to watch during the team roping." But it turned out that he was wrong. The finals in the team roping was just fabulous that year, and every team that rope went to the lead until the next team roped, and the people were on the edge of their seats, so it worked out very well.
Ken, I'll just add real quick to that point about team roping. Team roping has quickly become the most popular event from a PRCA contestant standpoint, right? The most membership in the PRCA. And from a dollars and cents standpoint, not to make everything about money, but you mentioned just starting team roping in Ellensburg. This year, between what we're going to do in the rodeo, as well as, again, with our partnership with the Best of the Best crew, that, again, started with Scott and Joe, and then and Mark and Keith and Bob and Dan Powell have brought that along. So we have a partnership with them. So, again, in the Valley, over Labor Day weekend, paid out to team ropers this year will be over $250,000.
That's awesome.
If I might put a plug in for the Hall of Fame, in 2003, our family started, we call it, Brian calls it the Best of the Best. We like to call it the West Star Best of the Best. Anyway, the first year we paid out $13,000. Didn't know if anybody would come. The last year we did it, which was 2019, it paid out over $200,000. And we're the most proud of one thing, and we're I think the only large team roping event in the U.S. We've never taken 10 cents from the Cowboys. We've paid back over 100% every time. And thanks to the Hall of Fame volunteered every year for parking, admissions. Mike Allen sold more tickets to let people get into that event for, every year. We did it out of the goodness of the community. We had 40 sponsors other than Ellensburg Rodeo sponsors. They were just people that came out of the community that wanted to help and just out of the goodness of their heart saw what was going on at the rodeo. 3 years ago, I think it's been, I guess this will be the third year, the rodeo, Mark Anderson, Dan Powell, Keith Winters, and Bob Berkheimer took it over, which we were thrilled to see it stay here. And they've grown it even larger than we have. And once again, they've not taken a dime from the Cowboys. So this time, how the whole thing started is, I was on the board and I saw these kids, because they were our kids' age. Most of them are broke by the time they get to Ellensburg. I mean, they've been rodeoing all summer and they're broke, And so, they'd borrow money to, pay entry fee. There was a boy, Shane Sproul, a boy from Montana. He won our roping, and he hugged my wife at the finals in Las Vegas and said, if I wouldn't have won your roping, I wouldn't have kept going. And that year he made enough money to make it to the finals. Point being, most of them are, all the years we did it, never had I'm not going to say they didn't bounce a check. They made every check good because they knew where what was going on and everything. But these kids, they were thankful for the community of Ellensburg, and we had furniture stores give gifts. We had gas stations give gift certificates. Ellensburg came together like no tomorrow. If you looked at some of those posters we did and you looked at the sponsors, if it wasn't the Palace Restaurant gave $1,000 worth of gift certificates. You just on and on. I think about every business in town. Gas stations gave fuel cards. Everybody in Ellensburg just helped because the casino out here, a guy came to me and he said, we thought the night of our roping, which was always the day before slack at Ellensburg, which was usually Wednesday, he said it was the biggest day they'd ever had. Well, these Cowboys are all gamblers, they made money out in the country and then they brought it to town. He said we're going to get more people, and he gave, once again, this story gave me. But anyway, I was very thankful of the Hall of Fame because if we didn't have those guys parking cars and get things organized, it would not have happened. And the rodeo board taking it over has been great.
One of the things that, if my memory serves me well, I think the Ellensburg Rodeo was the first time I had ever seen ladies breakaway roping. And now it is a big time event throughout the United States. But I think that started in, I don't know, I can't say that it started in Ellensburg, but we were doing it long before it was very popular. Right, Scott? Yeah. Ken, were you going to?
The late Eldon Weidenbaugh was very influential in getting it started because he knew he had ropings at his place and he knew those girls could rope, and it's turned into a pretty good event. They've 2.2 seconds out of the chute and it's around their neck, and that's not bad.
Well, when we did the upgrade, the edit on the arena record sign, we had one person in 2012 2022, or no, 2021, that had a 2.4. Well, there were 3 girls that went in the edit on the board now at 2.1, right, Mike? So there's 3 ladies up on that board now. So.
You know, there's a tremendous amount of action for that event, and it's a great appeal to the spectator. There's also a little bit of the business side of it. When we study who actually buys tickets to the rodeo, over 70% of the tickets are bought by a female. And so it's really important to make sure that we are satisfying those ticket buyers.
Well, that's great. One of the other things that really changed, my first year on the rodeo board was 1982, and it was the first year that they decided to go to 4 pers. It used to be Saturday, Sunday, and Labor Day. And we ended up having it on Friday afternoon, and there had to be about 800 people there, I think. It was pretty sparse looking out there, and fortunately we weren't televised that day. We were televised on Saturday, Sunday, and Labor Day. But anyway, that grew into a Friday night event, which is growing every year, it seems to be. So that was a big change, in the event itself.
Yeah, Friday night is actually honestly Monday finals is probably still my favorite, just given the caliber of the athletes and the animal athletes on Monday. But setting Monday aside, Friday night's really special to me and our family. It's a local feel, a little cooler, a little more intimate, and then also the last 5-6 years, Kerry, we've been bringing Patriot Night into it, and it really hits at the core of who we are as a community and the core of who we are as a rodeo industry. And it really highlights those things. This year, we're going to be honoring Desert Storm and Desert Shield. We've got some very special presentations that I guarantee you guys are going to be blown away with on Friday night. So if you don't have a ticket for Friday night, go get one, please. And yes, the attendance has been growing. I think when I first got on the board in 2007, we'd sell maybe 4,500, maybe 5,000 tickets. Last year we were over 60, I think 68, almost 7,000 tickets. Not a sellout, but growing very, very nicely. So get your Friday tickets.
Okay, it's about that time. If anybody has any comments or stories to tell or questions of the guys up here, why, go ahead. Mike?
I'm going to move the microphone around the room, and you can take a break, bud. Okay, but I was a little remiss in my duties tonight. I didn't introduce our Ellensburg Rodeo Queen, Alexis Andrews, who is here this evening. But before you go too far, Joel, I want to ask one question, and then I'm going to move around here. We didn't talk too much tonight about the transition from concerts to bowls on Saturday night. Would you say something about that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Mike. I think the last concert, I can't remember whether it was 99 or something like that, but the board felt at that time that it was a big roll of the dice. The entertainment was getting pretty expensive, and we had to move it to a Thursday night, which wasn't getting the amount of people in from the other side of the mountains. And so anyway, the board decided to pull a halt to it, and I don't know who put this together, but they had big time wrestling the next year. It was sort of a flop, I think. But anyway, to get a little bit of the story about the Extreme Bulls thing, the way that happened, a friend of ours, Charles Sampson, he's an inductee into the Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame, got stepped on in Yakima, and Dr. Hershey fixed him up here in Ellensburg, and his wife and family were living in Seattle, and he asked me to give him a ride to Seattle after his surgery, and this was at the old Yakima Rodeo. And anyway, so I'm driving out, and one of my jobs on the board was called contestant relations. And I'd kind of worked a few things, and we had some guy come in, I can't remember his name. We had a building up on parking lot up on that hill across from KXLE that served food. And we had lined up a deal at Sue Lombard if the Cowboys made the short go, for an example, and they didn't really have a place to stay, they could go to the Sue Lombard and they could stay for 2 or 3 days, or they could stay for 2 or 3 hours. And I ran that by Charlie, and he said, well, you know what you ought to do is you ought to have a standalone bull riding. I said, well, why is that? And he says, well, it's perfect time of the year. It's catching on. He was involved at the time, or getting involved in what they called the BRO, the Bull Riders Only group. And then the next thing that happened was the PBR. And anyway, took it back to the board, and it flew. And so we put on a bull riding that wasn't affiliated with anybody. And we had a good partner in Don Hutzel, brought most all the bulls, and he had some friends that brought some bulls from California and from Utah. And we named it the Extreme Bulls. And it worked out really good. The short round, the only guy that rode was a guy named B.J. Schumacher, who rode a bull called Unforgiven for 90 points. It was the last ride of the night. And the place went crazy. You know, we didn't let anybody sit in the old grandstands because we wanted it to look real good, the rest of the place. But at the end of the deal, a guy named Brian McDonald, who was the bull riding director, came over with some staff member from the PRCA and said, hey, we're starting a tour to get the bull riders back from the PBR and the BRO. And we'd like to kind of do what you did here. And that's how it all started. And
Thanks,
right
Joe.
now, Brian, it's making you some money, isn't it?
Yeah, Extreme Bulls on Saturday night is obviously a phenomenal event across Labor Day weekend. It's not only something that we all enjoy and we're super proud of. Unfortunately, it's already sold out this year. I'd tell you to go get a ticket, but I'd be wasting your time. It's such a demand. But we're really, really proud. The last 2 years, we've actually earned the Extreme Bull event of the year, voted by the bull riders themselves. So we're really, really proud of that. We pay out a tremendous amount of money, over $112,000 to the Cowboys that night, the bull riders that night. But it's a phenomenal event for our rodeo and our community, and the Cowboys, the bull riders all year long talk about getting to Ellensburg for that.
Thanks very much. Well, we've got some time for some stories and experiences. I know as I look around this room here, I see some folks who could tell us something or another. So how about it? Would anyone like to have the microphone for a minute or two here?
Just don't give it to Roger, please. Oh.
Roger Weaver, who was president during the 75th anniversary of the Ellensburg Rodeo.
You didn't have to tell him that. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to start, when you go back and you remember all the things that have been accomplished, and the other day I had a great phone call with Rick Cole, and Rick Cole summed it up pretty well. He said, I just can't imagine what we did as a board and what we accomplished together over the 30-some years or 20-some years. All of us guys were actually working together, okay? And it was phenomenal. And where it started, where it really helped us was when we did the new contract with Mary's help. And I'm going to say it again, without you, we wouldn't have got that done. But basically, every year we had to go through a very negative negotiations with the county. And it wasn't fun at all. But we had it, the board got together and we kind of said we have to safeguard our event. And to safeguard the event, what we ended up with was a new agreement. And basically, we finally had control of our own revenue and our own facilities. And we were able then to generate some revenue sources that would really make that work. And we really took off. I mean, after that, we really did. But I'm also glad to see Scott here because I owe him an expression of gratitude. Because we did a lot of crazy things to try to make Friday somehow important, okay? Alan Faltus, in his great wisdom, had a great friend in Seattle called David Stern. It was an advertising agency, okay? And their idea was to somehow attract a different kind of act or a different kind of attraction to the rodeo. So Scott will crack up when he hears what I'm going to say. It happened to do with Captain America, okay? And they felt that, you know, and he was making a big splash in Seattle, okay, and with Daredevil and all this kind of stuff. So we kind of said, all right, we'll try it. Okay, so he came here, and I talked to Steve Alder day before yesterday. He says, remember, I was out there at the first aid waiting for this guy. Yeah. And so, but Scott and Brad and I all came on the rodeo board pretty much the same year, didn't we, Scott, on that? Yeah. And so Maynard Linder had a bunch of ideas of how to use us guys, okay? So he said, why don't you take charges and try to make it work? Well, Captain America shows up. He's scheduled to appear Friday, and Ken remembers now. And so Scott and Brad and I are out in the arena waiting for them to come in, and we took one. What the act was? He's supposed to jump off a ladder into a pool full of rattlesnakes. Okay, and that's what was sold. Okay. Well, what happened was when he got there, we see this guy come into the arena with a kiddie pool and a cooler, a white cooler, and maybe a 10-foot ladder, okay? And I'm telling you, Brad was very perceptive, but that chicken, he started backing up, taking steps all the way back. He didn't want any part of this. He could see this was not going to be a good deal. So he backs all the way up to the bucking chutes, okay, and Scott and I are stuck out there in the middle. Okay, Scott, bless his heart, you know, he's a curious guy. And that's part of his creativity because he always wants to see how stuff comes together, right? So he's standing there and I'm looking there and I didn't know where to something or go blind, okay, because it was ridiculous, okay? And Ken's buddies, I'm going to blame it on you, but remember the guys that used to line up from the roping chute all the way to the bucking chutes, and they always had great things to say about the committees and what we did? You know, Teleferros and Wyatt and all those guys are up there. Oh, they were just giving us stuff. Anyway, but the reason I want to acknowledge Scott is that, by golly, he stood there with me. He didn't get off. He didn't run off. He didn't do it. But he's looking in the pool. He's looking at the ladder, and all of a sudden he sees the cooler. Scott says, snakes and ice don't do well together. And so, but we were willing to try anything, okay, and to try to get something to work. One more. David Stern had another idea of creating some new entertainment behind the chutes to attract more people to that. Well, that ended up being a Caribbean drum band, okay? And I can't tell you what Buck Miner said when he saw, and that was not a hit. So after all those great experiments, we decided to do what we thought we could do best, and that is improve that facility and generate more revenue. And that's exactly the target we took. And you heard great stories about it tonight, but you know, within a year or so, we're building new grandstands. We got behind the chutes. We got sponsors. We've got all these things going. We added a tremendous amount of revenue that gave us our independence to improve that facility and create the history these gentlemen are talking about tonight. And again, the volunteers, you know, just can't do it without them. Can't do it with the hours these pipe guys put in. And we couldn't do it with some of our wives, okay? Because I can tell you about behind the chutes, and Scott remembers this, and Mary brought it up at the last meeting. No, I'm not going to talk about how you carry your money. But anyway, and Scott can tell you, and I can tell you, you know, it was one of those things that ran away from us. You know, we had such success, and we had all that cash, and we had all that money, but trying to get it controlled. And then I remember the Budweiser guy at the time, I think, went to Maynard and said, I think you guys better tighten things up a little bit. And we said, why? And he said, because you're doing, with the beer you're selling, you should have a lot more money. Okay? And so basically, what we did, we had poor college kids in there. They were making change and pouring beer all at the same time. Okay? And it was something else. But once we got control of it and then brought in the wooden nickels and the wooden tokens and all that kind of stuff, it was fine. But my wife has never forgiven me for making her go in a K-9 unit to deposit thousands of dollars at night at the bank. So anyway, but that was it.
I might mention my good friend Alan Faldus was on the board for all those years. In fact, longer than anybody else, I think, except now Rick Coles broke his record. But anyway, Alan was a treasurer and a good businessman. But in those short money days, he had a tendency to give us kind of an abbreviated financial report because he didn't really want us to know how much money we had because he's afraid we'd spend it.
How about somebody over here? Do we have? Here we go.
Like everybody, I'm sure I have plenty of stories too, but I actually have more questions, and I'm not sure. I mean, probably everybody here who are rodeo fanatics like me would understand, but maybe not a lot of people in the community or rodeo fans in general would know how much business is done, like at the NFR. A lot of us go to the NFR just to, go watch the greatest cowboys and barrel racers in the world, but there's a ton of business done in the days leading up to the NFR, and then also I'm sure there's a ton of business or just swapping of ideas going to other rodeos. And I know there was a contingent to go the Sisters, which was last weekend. They go every year, and tons of partners around the circuit and everywhere on the PRCA. But can you kind of shed some light on the business that's done?
John,
Yes, sir.
Have you heard the phrase, what happens in Vegas?
Can you tell me the business part of Vegas and none of the stories that include Mr. Kerry Clift right here, and none of the stories that include Mr. Bosman behind me at Sisters?
I will oblige you, give you a quick thumbnail sketch of what we do at our PRCA convention in Vegas, and then maybe Ken or Scott can even talk about Denver days, right? But
No, we don't talk about them.
Yeah. What John's alluding to is the NFR starts on a Thursday and goes through the following Saturday. But the Monday prior to that first Thursday is when the PRCA convention starts, and that's when all of the committees, there's roughly 600 plus committees across North America. So the vast majority of the committees are there, contract acts, announcers, and bullfighters, and you name it, are all there for a convention. And we get together for keynote speeches and breakout speeches and topics on, you name it, marketing and animal welfare and production aspects and the like. And then there's a vendor breakouts, and it's a phenomenal time. But really, it is about connections. It's about relationships. It's about meeting and rebuilding and rekindling those relationships that you've met up and down the rodeo trail, and exchanging ideas and thoughts about what's working in one community or for one rodeo, and how might that translate to Ellensburg and vice versa. And that's really, I think, if you ask any one of the board members, current or past, one of their favorite aspects of being a part of the board is the relationships they built, not only on the board but outside of the board across the rodeo trail. And Las Vegas for me is really where that starts. But tremendous amount of fun and enjoyment. Yes, a lot of business, negotiations, contracts. We're extending contracts out multiple years in advance for those contract acts and things of the like, and connecting with PRCA folks to make sure we're in alignment with where they're trying to go. Or oftentimes, to be honest, we're trying to steer them in one direction or another because we're not super happy, et cetera. But I have heard some interesting stories because before Las Vegas, I know a similar function happened not in December, but I believe in January and in December in Denver. So maybe there's some history there you want to share a little bit, Ken.
Well, in the old days, in order to get your rodeo approved by the PRCA, or in those days it was just the Rodeo Cowboys Association, the whole board would sit in a room, the whole PRCA board, which is made up of one representative from each event and some other people, contractors and so on. Anyway, you had to go in there face to face, present your rodeo, how much you were going to add in money, and they'd either approve it or not right there. And when I first got on the board, the mentality of the Ellensburg Rodeo was sort of to try to get approved with the very least money they could put up, because money was tight. But I tried to change the feeling to give them the most money they could possibly afford. And then we finally, by following that program, we jumped right into the top 15 rodeos in the United States. And I think by money performance, we're probably as high as number 10.
How about someone else? Do we have any? Yeah, Carrie.
So this is for the past directors. So with all the events that we don't do now, is there something that you wish you would have kept on? So like the dinner bell race or the bull with the chariot? Do we need? Is there something that was done in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that we need to be doing now?
Well, I might address the barrel race. In the early days, the barrel race was not a standard event, and we had some good barrel racers here in Ellensburg, and the board finally let them be in the Monday performance only. They'd have slack before that to find out who the top 12 would be, and then they barrel raced in the Monday performance. And I can remember these words coming out of my mouth: the barrel racing is a good event with the crowd. It doesn't take hardly anything to put it on. It's quick. Let's just have it in every event, or in every rodeo. And finally, they decided to do that. It wasn't too much long after, quite a ways, I guess, after that barrel racing was standard in any PRCA rodeo.
How about the rest of you? Is there an event that you'd like to bring back, or something that you kind of miss from the old days?
I would love to hear the story of the chariot. A lot of people might like to hear that. The bull chariot.
Well, the bull chariot, we had a couple of them, didn't we? One got torn up so badly we had to find somebody that had another one, and one of the stock contractors, maybe it was Larry Wyatt, had one or something. But the last two guys that got in the chariot were Miles Hare and Rob Smets. And it was the biggest wreck I've ever seen in the arena. A pretty wise bull. I think he'd been hooked up to a chariot before. Went straight out, turned around, and just ran him right back into the buck and shoots. And both of them, Miles was knocked out. Rob was able to escape and jump the bull as he's coming back into the pipes, knowing that what was going to happen. But probably don't want to ever see that again.
Maybe none of you, or not all of you, may have seen the bull chariot, but it was, we put a surcingle with a leather top on it, and it had a ring built into it was like a bareback rigging, only it was just a big ring. And the chariot had a arched tongue, and it would go over the top of the bucking chute, and then we'd put a pin in there that was hooked to a rope where they could release if things got bad enough. And of course somebody had to pull that rope, or else the bull would die with that chariot on him. But it was pretty exciting, and most of the time the bull did learn how to. The chariot was painted red, so he had something to charge, and then he turned around. He couldn't quite reach the chariot, but he kept chasing it.
Does anyone else have a question or a story? Okay. Would you stand up, Mary? Thank you.
I have two quick things.
Roger mentioning the contract with the rodeo board and the county. As many of you who have been rodeo fans for years remembered that the county would want 50 cents a ticket. And a few years, that contract would not get signed between the rodeo board and the fair board till probably 5 o'clock the night of the Friday rodeo, or it used to be at midnight on Friday before the Saturday rodeo. There was always that contention between the county and the rodeo board because they didn't think it was fair, it wasn't equal. Well, my thing, when I became a county commissioner, I was going to get a contract through that helped these gentlemen for years to go as a contract they could live with, and they wouldn't be arguing every year and sitting at these tables. And we had some pretty damn good discussions, and I was the only woman in the room, but those men could talk, and they could say a lot of words I can't repeat. We thought we had it all signed. I flew to Vegas. The wives started going the last few years that Bill was on the board. I got to Vegas. The first one I see is Scott. What happened to the contract? Huh? Was that at church? No. Yeah, we were at church in Vegas. Yes, that's where I met him. Well, we always went to church. Anyway, what we had figured out the night before, and I had let him know, got changed as soon as I left town the next morning. Well, I was on the phone to the prosecuting attorney and the judge, Mike Cooper. What are we going to do? These guys changed everything. We got a copy the next day with our revisions as we had decided on the night before. And that's the contract that you had for 20-some years, I think, to keep the rodeo going. The other thing, there used to be a Big Four organization. None of you guys brought that up. I grew up with the Big Four. My dad was one of the originals with Clarence Anderson and so, to get the Big Four. And that was because the rodeos in the Northwest were not getting the cowboys that they needed for the support to keep the shows going. So the Big Four was started between Lewiston, Pendleton, Walla Walla, and Ellensburg. And the idea was that the cowboy that went to the cowboys that went to those rodeos, whoever earned the most money got the award at Pendleton, and it was a saddle or whatever. But that started bringing the big names to the Northwest for Labor Day weekend. The rodeo board is no longer a member of the Big Four, but it certainly kept the rodeo going for a lot of years. And the camaraderie between those four boards was unbelievable. We all got to know them. Each year it was held, the annual meeting was held either in one of those four cities, and we entertained them and they entertained us. And then at church in Las Vegas, they would they would have a party and they would be entertaining these cowboys and getting them to come to Ellensburg.
Carrie, I think Mary's been to the same church we were at.
Well, let's have a big round of applause.
So I just have, if we're wrapping up, I just have one quick 15-second note. It's been a thrill to be on the panel with Scott and Ken, you gentlemen, and Joel. The current board members look up to folks like yourselves, Roger Weaver, Alan Faltis, and many others that have been mentioned tonight. I would say that ultimately over the many generations and decades that have built this now 100-year rodeo, to me it really comes down to the basic concept that it's amazing what can get accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. And I really think that encapsulates everything about our rodeo board and our top hands and our allied organizations. When we don't care who gets the credit and we pull together despite our differences and put on the best thing we can for this valley and this community, we have what we've built over the last 100 years.
Thanks very much, Brian, and all of you. The tradition lives. We're going to have another get-together on July the 23rd. It will focus on royalty. I think it's going to be a good one. In the meantime, we're not going home quite yet. The bar will be open. We have merchandise. We invite you to all stick around and tell each other some stories, and maybe some of those stories will be true. We'll find out. But thank you very much for coming. Remember that our banquet is on August the 26th. The tickets are available online at www.erhof.org. Thank you very much. Night night.